Hey, one more thing before you go. In this episode, we're going to explore what it's like to live in a relationship with a narcissist. It's an emotional domestic violence situation that is unfortunately hidden under the guise of what appears to be normal. We're going to have a conversation with a woman who, in essence, was captive in that relationship for more than 22 years before escaping, healing, and helping others move forward in their life as she did, reinventing herself along the way. I'm your host, Michael Herst, and this is That Thing About Escaping a Toxic Relationship. You're going to learn how to recognize narcissistic relationships and what to do about them. What toxic love is, if you've ever heard that term before. Red flags for women and for men to watch for, because it doesn't only happen to women, it happens to men as well. And escaping that toxic relationship and how to move forward in life in a very positive way. So we'll be right back. Denise Velasquez is a transformational love coach, speaker, and an international best-selling author. She's a survivor and a thriver of narcissistic abuse. She's the founder of Life After Narcissism CSW Coaching, a global resource for victims of emotional abuse that offers support and coaching to women who are ready to break ties with narcissistic abuse in past relationships. Denise uses her real-life experience as a way to connect with others and teach, love, and support them in their healing journey with a mission statement to enhance the lives of survivors of abuse. Through 4 pillars of healing, empowering women to heal trauma and awaken their true potential, she creates an extraordinary life after narcissism. So, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Michael. I'm so excited to be here and talk to your audience about this topic. Thank you for having me.
Oh, absolutely. I think that, it's this particular this particular subject is kind of touchy in a lot of areas. As you and I had spoken with prior to this interview, my background in law enforcement dealt a lot with domestic violence, especially it was one of my expertises within that realm. And, people don't understand that domestic violence is not always just physical. It can be emotional or physical or a combination of both.
Mm-hmm.
So
yes.
I think we've got an opportunity here to kind of educate some people. But let's start at the beginning. Where'd you grow up?
Florida, South Florida, nice and warm. And I grew up in right outside of Fort Lauderdale and grew up in, mom, dad. We didn't have the traditional, which is kind of normal now, the split family or the blended family. And I have 2 sisters and got married at an early age. I was 21 when I got married. I think that's young. And because I later on I connected all the dots because I come from a emotionally abusive home. I recreated that in my adult relationship with the father of my 2 children. And of course, didn't know that at the time. So I got married young, had children young, and lived a life of what I thought was normal, right? Because this is something that I had witnessed my entire life. But things really started to take a turn, Michael, when there was drug use involved, which changes everything. And then in 2008 was when my children and I had experienced the biggest trauma ever. And that was the attempted suicide of my then husband, who did that with our 14-year-old daughter in the next room. So that's when things started to.
From that perspective, yeah. Can I touch back a little bit on, you said you grew up in an environment that actually was kind of abusive emotionally, correct? Do you think that there's a lot of us as individuals, human beings, we kind of tend to emanate what we grew up with. Do you think
Absolutely.
that, a lot of people who currently suffer within those relationships actually had come from those relationships?
Yes. Yes. It's actually scientifically proven that if there's no healing piece involved between the last relationship, whatever that relationship is, including family, to the next relationship, we carry over everything that we learned from the last relationship into the new relationship, and including family. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really interesting because as I had said to you, I grew up in a dysfunctional family. Both my parents were alcoholics at the time. I chose a different path. I became a police officer because of that, which sounds weird. But when people always ask me, "Why'd you become a cop?" Well, I became a cop because I thought I could help, and I thought I could help within those type of situations because I could look at it from an out, not necessarily an inside perspective, but also as an outside perspective. I was the middle child, so it allowed me to kind of look at both ends, my older sibling and my younger sibling, and me kind of caught in the middle of it. So I understand that. Did you, before you got married, did you have any aspirations to go to college or university? Did you have anything like that you wanted to do?
Actually, no. I wanted to get married and have kids. That's what I wanted to do. And I think part of that is because later on during my healing journey, I discovered that my dad would always say to me, "Denise, you might as well go off and get married and have kids because that's all you're going to amount to." So maybe that's why there was no, itch inside of me to go to college. I really sucked at school, Michael. I really sucked at school. Didn't like it at all. I love the social part of it, but I had really, really bad grades. So that's where that came from, where my dad would say that to me because I come home with C's and D's and F's. And so he was just like, "Well, you might as well go off and get married and have kids because, it looks like school's not your thing." So no, I had no aspirations of that. Just wanted to get married and have kids.
Well, that works. I mean, that works too. It really does. Now, don't feel bad about the C's and the D's. And I found that when I was growing up in high school, that was like the norm. I didn't really value my grades until I went to university and went, "Wait a minute, I'm paying for this."
Right, exactly.
I decided to start learning a little bit harder, more in depth into what my grades were going to be. It's kind of cool. So did you, I know that you got married early. You realized that you were in a toxic relationship. So can you help us understand, you mentioned on your website and in some of the things that I've read about you, toxic love. During this time period, do you feel that that's what you were drawn into was toxic love?
Well, at the time, no. I was very much in love with my then husband and did everything. That's why I stayed in it for 22 years, did everything to try to keep our family together, keep the marriage together. But what I was doing was enabling his behavior because that's what narcissists do. Like there's always somebody to enable their behavior, which led to bad, worse behavior. His behavior got worse over time. So that's the 2008 attempted suicide that I was talking about. It progressed. It progressed. So that's when I told him I wanted a divorce in 2008. And then guilt got to me because my kids were like, "Mom, you can't leave Dad," because they were 14 and 13 at that time. So my guilt had me stay for another 2.5 years. And then that's when I left him for the first time with nothing but a futon couch and an air mattress. And I moved 3 states away to get away from him, to get away from just everything, because I felt like I couldn't even be in the same state with him because I didn't want to worry about running into him or his family or looking over my shoulder at the grocery store. I wanted to completely be away from him. So that's the first time that I left.
You mentioned a word within this your conversation here, narcissist. He said he was a narcissist. Can you help us understand what a narcissist is or narcissism is?
Sure. So the easiest way for me to describe somebody like that is very manipulating and controlling. That's the easiest way to describe these people. So this can be anybody. They come in all shapes and sizes. It could be anybody. It could be somebody at Starbucks. It could be the CEO of a company. Manipulating and controlling, and basically they seek out certain people to almost like be their slave, right? So also bully, that's a sign of narcissism when they're constantly trying to overpower somebody. I see it a lot in the workplace, see a lot in relationships, obviously, and in families, parents, siblings, all over in families. So that's the easiest way for me. Oh, yes, of course. Yes. Men or women. Yeah.
And do you find that within your experience, at least through your life experience as well as your coaching experience, do you feel that emotional abuse comes a lot from people who are narcissists?
Yes, that's how they abuse emotionally. So narcissistic abuse is what I call the silent abuse because there's no crime involved. So like domestic violence, there's a crime involved, right? Like the victim can call the police and like you've witnessed and say he or she hit me, right? Or they injured me. There's a crime involved. But with narcissistic abuse, that it's everything but that. It's everything but the physical or the sexual abuse. So it is all of the emotional abuse. And that's where the manipulation and the control comes in, right? That's where the manipulation tactics, they're master manipulators. So it's everything but that. And that's why I call it the silent abuse, because with narcissistic abuse, like I couldn't call the cops and say, my husband was being an asshole to me. He threw all my clothes out on the front lawn. He's kicking me out and I have 2 babies, so that's why I call it the silent abuse. It's everything but the physical and the sexual abuse.
Yeah, it's really interesting, at least from a law enforcement perspective, because at least in Colorado, this is where I was a law enforcement officer. I don't know how it is here in Arizona, but in some of the other states, but I know in Colorado specifically, they had evolved and had put emotional abuse as part of the domestic violence statute eventually, which a lot of people, those of us that dealt with it either from a personal perspective of experiencing it and or one that worked on a job that dealt with it on a consistent basis, we understood that, what it was. We had, just to help our listeners understand the conversation, we had individuals that we couldn't understand. In the beginning, you'd kind of go, why do you keep coming back? Why do you keep going back to this person? Why are we continuously coming here every week? And, it took a lot of education. It took a lot of empathy, compassion, understanding to kind of really get in depth with knowing what emotional abuse was, knowing the power that they put over somebody, the guilt that they put over somebody, you can't live without me. And I don't, your self-esteem gets destroyed to such a point that you don't feel that you can live without them or to move forward from them. So
you believe it.
Now, you said you managed to get out of that 22-year toxic relationship. What steps did you take to kind of help yourself get out of that? Or did you, let me back up of it, if you don't mind, please. I think I kind of got ahead of myself. Did any of your relatives, your friends, or your colleagues happen to see this from the outside perspective? Did they see this going on?
Well, not until the 2008 event. They didn't. I mean, they didn't want to see it because we lived in a nice house. Right. My kids went to private school. I drove a nice car. We had a pool home in Florida on a cul-de-sac street. Like everything from the outside looked perfect. And we took vacation several times a year. Like everything looked normal. And especially when people have not healed their own emotional wounds, they don't see it as, like you said, dysfunctional or whatever. Mm-hmm. They see it as just, that's just part of the relationship. You just gotta, kiss before you go to bed. Don't. Yeah.
Don't go to bed angry and leave it at that. And
Yeah.
no matter what the anger was for, or what it's about, or what the
Right.
subtext of the anger was involved in it. Yeah, which is really kind of unfortunate. But we're here to help people overcome that, and we're here to discuss that so that we have a pathway for those of you that are listening who are experiencing it, or those of you who are watching are experiencing it, or know somebody that is. Just, hopefully we can give you some tips and some kind of a pathway to success in getting out of that. So when you started realizing that pattern within your particular marriage, did you, what kind of things did you see? What kind of things did you start recognizing, like red flags, for example, that somebody might kind of look at or recognize? Are you okay? So when you first realized the pattern in your marriage, where you saw the emotional abuse and you saw the narcissism and you saw what needed to be done in order for you to get out of a toxic environment, basically, what kind of red flags did you see, or did you recognize, or have you recognized since then that we might be able to share with everybody? So if they're within the same environment, it gives them the opportunity to kind of recognize.
I think looking back, I remember by the time I was 30, I was like, this isn't working. Like, this relationship isn't working. I'm not happy. I'm crying more than I'm laughing. There was a lot of, like you said, dysfunction. So there's a lot of labels you could put to it, but I didn't want to really look at the truth of what was really happening, which was abuse. And it actually, Michael, wasn't until I was out of the relationship for 2 years before I really realized it was abuse. I was in an abusive relationship and I was an abused woman. So um, I think that's the biggest clue, is that in the relationship, the red flags would be you cry more than you're laughing. Right? There's more bad times than there is good times. You're constantly putting out fires. You're people pleasing, trying to keep the narcissist happy, and nothing's ever good enough. Like, that's a huge red flag. No matter how much you try, no matter what you do, it's never good enough for the narcissist. I think that's the biggest flag.
Yeah, I think that a lot of people don't, and then we said this earlier, but in reality, sometimes you need to understand what some of the red flags may be, that this is not normal, and that you may think it's normal, you may feel that it's normal, it may be presented to you that it's normal, but in reality, there's a dysfunction there that needs to be recognized, that this is not normal. You need to be happy. You need to be able to laugh. You need to be able to move forward in your life in a positive way. You need to, everybody's got, especially people living together, in no matter which form that you're living together, you've got arguments. You will have little arguments, but how they're handled is what makes the difference. I think
Absolutely.
it's kind of
Yeah.
one of those things. But yeah, red flags are important.
Yes.
And then technically, emotional abuse is domestic violence. It's just a different manner of domestic violence, but it constitutes domestic violence. And if you're within that arena, if you're within that environment, or somebody that's in that environment, there are steps that you can take to help get yourself out of there. So,
Absolutely.
what steps did you take to kind of protect yourself? I know you moved like 3 states away. Did that help?
Yeah, that was a a huge leap forward in my healing, because for anybody who's listening, I just want you to know that every day that you go no contact, you are healing. Every day that you're out of that situation, you're healing. So yeah, that helped a lot, because like I said, I didn't have to worry. I didn't have to look over my shoulder. I was free. I felt like I was let out of prison. I was free from his abuse in the grips of that environment. And that's what I tell people, like, block, when you're ready to leave, because there has to be a readiness. That's why it took me 22 years. When you're ready to leave, to block them from, every contact that they've had with you. That's going to help a lot. And focus on you. That's another huge one, is to focus on you, to go within. So I didn't realize that I was from an abusive home, because when you grow up with it, you think it's normal. You don't realize it. So if I didn't know that, then how would I know that my adult relationship was abusive, right? So yeah, dysfunctional. Yeah, you're not happy. Yeah, it's, toxic. There's all these words that you can use, but the real word is abuse. And like you were saying, Michael, it is domestic abuse. It is domestic violence. There's lots of TED Talks on this. And also I write about this, how it's still domestic abuse, and that some people don't know that because they're not being hit or sexually assaulted, but it's still domestic abuse.
Yeah, 100%. Are there any red flags in, like, men that young women should be recognized? I have two daughters, and I taught them from my perspective, say, hey, look, but I also was a little biased because I'm a dad, my dad shoes on as well as my cop shoes on. It was, hey, watch for this or watch for that. Or, I recognized some things and patterns that started taking place in one of my daughter's relationships, and I made her aware of it. And at first she was kind of upset about it, and then she kind of went, well, yeah, I guess you're right, sort of thing. So can we help other young women or other young men understand what some red flags they need to be looking for or monitoring? So if they're dating or if they've started a relationship?
Absolutely. I love that question, because this does start at a young age. My ideal clients they've been married, they've been divorced, so they're a little bit older. But I have a 28-year-old daughter who was in this type of relationship for 7 years. And it was literally a carbon copy of what she saw growing up, right? Myself and her dad. So the red flags that they can look for, the young women, is basically the same of what I was saying, is where you're not happy in this relationship, where he's being controlling. And the thing about it is, Michael, is that the controlling tactics can be so subtle. So subtle. So I was watching some kind of crime show, because I delve into this to really know the psychological part of all of this. And there was this one couple, and she put on this dress, and the boyfriend says, that dress, I don't know. I don't like that dress on you. Why don't you wear the one that I got you? The one that I bought you? That one looks a lot better on you. So a woman might think, oh, that's so sweet. He wants me to wear his dress, or he even bought me a dress, right? But what's really happening, like the underlayers of that, is that he didn't like your decision and what you chose. He wanted it to be his decision and what he chose. Controlling. So that's how subtle it can be. So there's a lot of red flags, but the biggest ones that I would say to the young women is that, first of all, these people, because it could be men or women, these people don't show up with a sign that says, I'm a big asshole, date me. I'm going to treat you like crap, date me. They show up very charming and charismatic. So you have to really know what you're dealing with. And when you start to see the signs, to listen to yourself, to listen to your gut, to listen to your intuition, or your dad, that this is not the right person for me. This relationship isn't healthy. This relationship isn't healthy for me. So one question that I like to give as a tool for women to use, or men, is, it's a fill in the blank. So if I truly and deeply love myself, would I, and then they fill in the blank. So for me, if I truly and deeply loved myself, would I have endured 22 years of that relationship. And then that's going to help them when they fill in the blank. That's going to help them to get a nudge and a clue of what's happening, what's really happening on the deeper levels.
And that's really important. I think that when we give the opportunity to stop and empower ourselves, to take a positive action to change our environment, I think that's a very positive step in healing, right?
Absolutely, yes. And that's why I love to give these tools, because I always share, like, if you simply take these tools that I give and use them every single day, your life will transform.
If somebody finds themselves within a situation, what do you recommend their first step in healing would be? And removing themselves from that environment, or taking the
Yes.
steps to prepare for it? Do you recommend, and I realize that, obviously we are not doctors, we're not lawyers, we're not, our experience comes from personal experience as well as professional experience.
Mm-hmm.
But what would you recommend? Do you think that they need to prepare to make that step to leave? They don't just up and leave with nowhere to go. Should they have someplace in mind? Should they ask for help?
Well, it really depends on the situation. So if we're talking about emotional abuse and there's no physical abuse involved, then I would say I've had women who have come to me for services, assistance in helping them leave safely and leave, getting what they asked for in the divorce. I think it's imperative to have emotional support when they're going through this, because the manipulation and the control only gets worse when that person decides to leave. So yes, get emotional support, whether that be counselor, therapist, coach, mentor, whatever, somebody who's walked that walk and is on the other side of that. If it is somebody who's in a domestic violence and they're being hurt physically every single day, that's a tough one. So to leave safely, like I said, it would depend on the situation. They would have to create a very strategic plan. It's totally doable. They can do it. A strategic plan. And what I teach women is how to master manipulation more than the master manipulator. And maybe some people don't like that word, manipulation, but manipulation is oftentimes used as good. So you can outsmart the narcissist, because narcissistic people, abusive people, their behavior is very predictable. Very predictable. So there is a way for them, even in a domestic violence status, they can leave safely, get out, and recreate their life over again.
Well, and from a law enforcement perspective, I would recommend that, we mentioned the physical abuse as well. Obviously you need to make that phone call and take the opportunity to remove yourself from that situation, especially if it's violent. But
Yeah.
And I say especially if it's violent, because it does not take away from anything being emotional as well, as we said earlier. But if physical abuse or sexual abuse can escalate to such a point that it endangers you or those around you, your children or whatever,
Right.
at such a point. So yeah, find the way, make the phone call, try to get out of that situation as soon as possible. Even if you have to ask somebody, a friend or a relative, to say, hey, can I stay with you? Can you help me get this accomplished and remove myself?
Yeah, and for the abuser and their behavior, here's my diagnosis. I'm not a doctor or therapist or anything, but here's what I've seen. There's different levels of narcissism. That's a fact. Then for me, when somebody is physically abusing somebody, that's sociopathic and even psychopathic behavior, because as we know, and being a cop and knowing the domestic violence, a lot of these relationships end up with death.
Yes.
And
Unfortunately.
when they hurt somebody to the point of no life, that's psychopathic behavior, right? Not just narcissism.
100%.
Yeah.
100%. And, it's interesting, again, as a father raising two daughters, obviously I was very overprotective, and, I have to smile because sometimes I went, my oldest daughter on her first date, see, all my colleagues knew that she was going on her first date. So here's this poor young man that was driving away in the nice pickup truck. And, we walked her to the door and to have a good time and so forth. And then every cop car that went behind them or beside them, they were nervous the whole time they were away. And it's like, you got to have her back by, 10 o'clock, 10:30, I think it was. And, he had her back at 9:30. So I just want to make sure. Yeah, it's like, okay. And I didn't say anything. It was just the fact that he knew I was a cop. And then, so I said, just, you never know. And every time he looked at a cop car, he thought it was somebody that was there watching him and my daughter. It was, She never forgave me for that. I said, come on, I didn't do all that. It just happened to be there, and they just happened to be right there.
Yeah. It can happen.
It can happen, exactly. So what got you interested in being a coach? I know that you left. Did you have a career when you left, or did you start one when you left prior to becoming a coach?
I was actually running his business in Florida and air conditioning and appliances. And that's actually what gave me the confidence to start my own business, because I was running his business successfully. It was really doing great. We were about to expand to the other side of Florida, the west coast of Florida. And I did everything on the back end of the business. So the marketing, obviously taking care of the customers, dispatching the calls, all that entails that business on the back end. And he went and did like the physical, ran the calls, fixed the appliances, air conditioning. So it was through that experience when I came here to North Carolina, I was like, well, I had to get a job. So I went back to what I went to school for, which was medical. So I did medical sales here in North Carolina. And it was through that experience that I was like, I really want to have my own business. And I didn't know what that was. I knew only a few things. One, I wanted it to be online. I wanted the freedom to have an online business. I would visualize myself like on the computer, poolside, clients are coming in, I'm coaching or whatever I was doing because I didn't know it at the time. So that led to me finding my first business coach, hiring my first business coach, and then being shown how to create an online audience. So at that time, I didn't know exactly what I was going to do. I thought, okay, I guess I'm a divorce coach. I don't know. I hadn't gone through my healing journey either. So that was really important too. So when I did, because my business coach was like, get them on the phone and get them into, a program. And I'm like, what program?
Yeah, get them into what?
I don't know. Yeah. And what tools could I give them? Like I had no tools because I hadn't gone through my own healing journey. So and that energy conveyed through the phone line when I was on the phone with the women. So obviously I didn't get a client that year. I had to go through my own healing journey and discover like, there's some stuff that I need to learn about myself in order for me to help these women. Like I have nothing to help them with. So that led to me doing that. And then that's when I started getting clients because I had something to give to them. And then I discovered I started writing chapters in books, and I wrote a chapter in a book. The book's called A New Day Dawns, Breaking Up with Abuse. And it was in that chapter that I wrote that it dawned on me, literally, Denise, you're supposed to talk about narcissistic abuse. That's your thing. That's what you're supposed to talk about.
That's a niche.
Right. My niche. Right. So ever since then, that's what I focus on. I focus on the narcissistic abuse. That's why I call it the silent abuse. And that's how I was able to go into more healing of myself, to really recognize like all the signs, all the, looking back at my relationship and everything, to be able to, verbalize that out into the world in messages and emails so that it's relatable. And then women, come to me and ask for assistance or help, or even doing an interview to help them.
I think life experience, every coach I've ever talked to, the majority of it, I would say the majority, because there has been a few that went into coaching just because they thought they'd make a lot of money at it, and they really didn't have life experience in order to do what they were trying to coach. They just said, I'm going to be a coach, and this is what I want to do because it makes a lot of money.
Right.
I have found that people who are invested in it from a personal perspective make a better coach anyway, because
Yes.
we can empathize and we can, not just understand, but empathize. We've been there.
There's a passion there.
Yeah, even though we've done that, we know how you feel, not just because we understand it, because we've experienced it, and that in itself is my education. My childhood is my education. My 22 years in a toxic marriage is my education, and so that's outstanding that you were able to take that opportunity and kind of move it forward. I know that you have a blog that you write. Do you write on that a lot? Do you think blogging or journaling helped you?
Oh, yes. And that's something that I share with my clients. And even when I do interviews, is that to write, to literally put pen to paper. So no typing in the computer or on the phone. It's very, very therapeutic to put pen to paper and write out your feelings, or even what you want to create, what you want to manifest. That's how I manifested my husband now. When I came here in 2013, when I came here the second time in 2012, I wrote a letter to the universe, to God. And I said, this is what I want. And I described him. I wanted to make sure he had a good relationship with his mom, because that was really important, because the past showed me a lot about a son, mother relationship. And so I wrote all these things down, and I folded up it was 2 pieces of paper. I folded them up and I put them under my mattress, and I left it there. And, so that was 2012 or 2013. I didn't put the date, but I met my husband in 2013. So, yes, I tell people to write out your feelings, write out what you want to create. And then there's certain things that I have my clients do with writing that helps release whatever it is that needs to be peeled, shed, or healed out of their body, so that they're taking it out of their mind and out of their body and letting it go. And we do, burning letter rituals and things like that to help them completely release it out of their body.
Yeah, manifestation is a really good thing. I believe in manifestation 100%. I think that's a positive thing.
It's fun.
yeah, manifestation is good. And as well as the letter writing, the letter burning. In this particular podcast, those of you that do listen and those that are new, I've got some episodes in here where we actually use letter writing to communicate what we didn't get to say before losing somebody that we loved. And writing that letter out to them, and then going through that ritual of burning it and letting the ashes go up so it goes to them. So, I recommend it. I'm glad you did that. That's a pretty positive thing.
It is.
Glad you did that. Are there any steps or anything that you feel that might benefit our viewers, our listeners, in regard to helping them to get out of this situation? Is there a step plan, like step 1, I have to do this, step 2, I have to do that, step 3, I have to do that?
Yeah. So I can share my experience of how I did it. And that was, I set a date. That's one of the things, right? So what happened is the end of December 2010, my daughter came to me and said, Mom, I don't want to go to college in Florida. And I was like, okay, where do you want to go? It's weird. And she was like, I want to go to North Carolina. And I was like, okay, great. Well, this is not working out. This is a train wreck here. So I was like, we'll move. Great. This was the perfect opportunity. So what I did from then was I created a 5-month plan. So my daughter was graduating in May of the following year, 2011. And so that gave me plenty of time to plan out and a strategic plan on how to leave. So I set an amount that I needed for money, because, when you move, especially out of state, you need money, which for me was $10,000. And that's what I manifested, because I was working for his business And any money that I could get my hands on was funneled through him. So I didn't have a job and I didn't have an inheritance that I could tap into. So I had to create everything myself. So 5 months I felt like was a good amount of time. So I manifested the $10,000 and booked the Penske truck, right? I planned it. So this is what I would say to women is like, plan it out. You also have to be an actress and act like everything's okay, right? While you're in this plan, same behavior as before. You don't want to, set anything off so that he finds out about your plan, and plan it out. Where are you going to go? Book the Penske truck or the budget truck, whatever. Where are you going to live? So I literally was on, like, back then, Craigslist looking for apartments where I was going to live. Found a place or a few places that I was going to look. And Michael, I had the $10,000 to leave. I was there 4 days and had an apartment. And in 4 weeks, I had a job. Like, I was on fire. I manifested everything that I desired. I left safely. I left with even my then husband and I, being civil to each other, communicating, right? He helped put our daughter's car on the back of the car carrier. He knew I was going to North Carolina. So that's what I would say. I would say, create a plan. And the plan involves first a date, set a date. This is also the energy that you're putting out to the universe. You're giving the universe, okay, the details of what you're going to do, because the universe always wants you to be safe and happy. So when you can put this plan in place, then the universe is going to say yes to it and have that for you. So that's what I would say for anybody, first steps to leaving.
Those are great steps, the first steps of leaving. I think if I may interject, I think maybe a very good first step is to make the decision to make that plan. I think that would help. That way you know that what you're going to do, what kind of direction that you're going to move forward with, and then set the plan in motion. That's a really good opportunity for somebody to get in a much better position to stay positive in life. And manifestation works.
Right.
Everybody should try this.
Yes.
Manifestation is a very positive thing. Let's talk a little bit about how to get a hold of you for your coaching business and things like that. I know that you've got a website that you're working on, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah. True love after toxic love. That's my whole message to women, is that you can have true love after toxic love. I know, because I did it for myself, 22 years in that toxic relationship, and now married to the man of my dreams, which that's the picture right there. And that you can create anything that you want in life. You can write the ending to your story. So true love after toxic love. Yes. Everything's being rebranded since I got married, because everything was, website and everything was, with my divorce last name. And I have a Facebook group called Life After Narcissism. And the Facebook group is where I do training videos and answer questions and do daily posts, inspirational posts, empowering posts for women and men. There's both in there, to lift their spirits up and to know like they can literally create a life of their dreams. So that's Life After Narcissism on Facebook.
That's outstanding. And you obviously, like you said, you found the man of your dreams. So that's a very positive thing. You guys are having a wonderful, happy life. You got a smile on your face. I don't see,
Yes.
Those of you who are just listening to the podcast can't see this. Either look and watch the video or take my word for it. You glow, you're happy, you got a nice smile, and, you exude happiness, which is, you can see it.
Yes. And that's also what I share, Michael, that you can have a completely healthy relationship even if you've had nothing but cycles of abusive relationships in the past. And I'm living proof. My clients are living proof. Like, it is 100% possible for anybody.
Yep, 100%. I believe that. This is one more thing before you go. So do you have any words of wisdom that you'd like to share before we go?
Okay, so my quote just came up when you asked that. So my quote is, I didn't know what the future held, but I knew this. It was better than the past. And that was the energy that I went into coming to North Carolina. That was my thought process. I didn't know what was ahead of me, but I knew it was going to be better than the past. And that's some inspiration for your listeners. Like, their future is super bright if that's what they choose.
Those are excellent words of wisdom. I really appreciate that. Denise, thank you very much for coming on the show. I really appreciate you sharing your experience, your journey, your wisdom, and your opportunity for those that are going through this path and this journey within themselves to move forward in a very positive way. So thank you for joining me here.
Thank you, Michael. It's been a pleasure. And thank you for what you're doing and spreading this message.
Absolutely. And I'll have all the links for everybody in the show notes so that they can contact you and find you and kind of join your Facebook group and kind of move their life forward.
Sweet. Looking forward to it.
Thank you very much for joining us on this conversation. I really appreciate you. Don't forget, you can find our app, One More Thing Before You Go podcast, in the App Store or on Google Play. We can download our free app completely free. You can get a hold of it. It's a unique access to everything One More Thing Before You Go. It was developed and provided by Superpass, our sponsor. If you love us as much as we do, yes, I say that with generosity, please support us. We have merchandise available, unique to One More Thing Before You Go, inspiring and motivational. Tell somebody about us. We're going to have an exciting year coming up ahead. Please subscribe and follow us on any one of your favorite platforms here on YouTube or any one of the other ones, Apple, Spotify, Amazon, you name it. And we'll see you soon.
Thanks for listening to this episode of One More Thing Before You Go, a unique conversation about life. If you like our show and want to know more, check out our website at beforeyougopodcast.com. That's beforeyougopodcast.com. Tell your story, share your expertise, contribute to the blog, and subscribe to the newsletter. You can find us as well as subscribe to the program and rate us on your favorite podcast listening platform.
And one more thing before you go. Have a nice day, have a nice week, and thanks for listening.
One More Thing Before You Go, a unique conversation about life podcast, is a creation of One More Thing Productions, established 2010, all rights reserved.